What scientific theory scares the crap out of you? Story 1, a super resistant strain of life threatening bacteria or virus, evolving and spreading faster than antibiotic or viral development, is capable of keeping at bay. As someone who has had recurrent MRSA for a while now, this is my personal nightmare. It only comes back every once in a while, but I've given up all hope of ever really getting rid of it. You can only bleach your entire house, take bleach baths, wash all of the things, decolonize the dog, and stick antibiotics up your nose so many times before living with recurrent MRSA just becomes the easier option. I used to think I got rid of it, only to have it pop up 3 months later. The recurrences have been far more minor than the initial infection, but I honestly think that MRSA is what will kill me one day, that it'll be able to really take hold during some future unrelated health crisis. So that's fun. Story 2, the Cumbre Vieja Megatsunami Theory. The Cumbre Vieja is a ridge on one of the islands on the Canary Islands attached to a dormant volcano with failing structure. There are a couple theories that another eruption, or just time itself, could cause a catastrophic landslide into the Atlantic Ocean, causing a mega tsunami that hits the North American coast, among others, and potentially destroying cities. It's La Palma Island. The idea is that basically one-third of the island's above water landmass could slide into the ocean at any point. The crack on the island is slowly getting bigger over time, and eventually it's going to give. There have been various estimations and calculations around what would actually happen should the event occur. The most common belief is that the North America coast would be in real trouble. Central and South America will be in danger still, but to a lesser extent, Europe and Africa will have mild and no problems from it. Story 3, I forget what the theory is called, but it's something along the lines of this. Every 120,000 years on Earth, the electromagnetic field reverses. The North Pole becomes the South Pole, and vice versa. But all of our technology, phones, cars, lights, run via this electromagnetic field. What's scary is that we are at about 120,000 years since the last flip. So at any moment, all the electricity in the world can fail. With that, there would be no way to contact anyone, specifically the police, for the crimes to be committed. And at that, they wouldn't have cars because those run on electricity. Story 4, not sure this counts as a theory, but if we can use virtual reality to create a personal utopia with nothing but pleasure and euphoria, or whatever you want, then it should also be possible to create a virtual reality with nothing but pain and agony. Technically, it should be physically possible to create a life form. That entire existence is a perfectly sculpted hell where time is slowed to last for virtually eternity. Story 5. The idea that when teleporters are created, it won't actually move you. It will just end you as you leave and create a new person that thinks he is you at the other end. Millions of people will willingly walk into their own deaths every day without knowing. Think about this. You are actually just a specific accumulation of fundamental particles. Fundamental particles themselves have absolutely no identity. Each electron is exactly the same. If you give an atom, which already has at least one electron, an extra electron, and then remove one again, there is just fundamentally no way to know if you remove the one you added or a different one. So even technically, it would still actually be you on the other side. It's sort of like making digital copies. If you copy a file, the only way to know which one was the original is either knowing its physical position or by some extra saved meta information, creation time, etc. But fundamentally, the files are exactly the same, and you could never tell which one is the original, because bits don't actually have any identity. Story 6, Astronomers here. One that I always thought we don't mention often, even though we should, is while the sun is about halfway through its lifetime and has about 5 billion years to go, life on Earth will become impossible much earlier than that, and we are, in fact, nearing the end of habitability of Earth on a relative scale. Why? Well, the sun is steadily getting more luminous over time, which interrupts the cycle that recycles carbon into the atmosphere. Without this, carbon dioxide levels will fall, and all life that relies on carbon dioxide and oxygen will cease to exist, which is all of multicellular life that has ever existed. We have about 600 million years until this kicks in. and 800 million years until the oxygen runs out. This means of all the years multicellular life has been around, we have about a third of them to go. Make them count. Story 7. I think it's generally very freaky to think about the edge of the universe and the concept of nothing. How do you have literal nothingness? If there was nothing before the universe started, how is there room for the universe to exist? And not only that, but once you reach the edge of the universe, what's on the other side? Is it going to be like some sort of Truman Show madness? I don't know. Nothingness in the edge of the universe is freaky to me. Physicist here. The universe has no edge. It is most likely infinite in size and has no edge. The universe doesn't need an edge to expand. All that happens is that the distance between all points increases. There are two other possibilities for the geometry of the universe. The universe can be a three-sphere. Think of this as the three-dimensional equivalent of the surface of a ball. In this case, if you keep going straight in one direction, you will eventually return to where you started. Parallel lines will also converge, and the sum of the angles in a triangle will be larger than 180 degrees. The universe is hyperbolic. This is slightly more difficult to imagine, but parallel lines will diverge, and the sum of the angles in a triangle will be smaller than 180 degrees. I hope this helps a bit. Additional note. Current experimental data says that the universe is pretty much completely flat. This in itself raises some very interesting questions. Look up the flatness problem you're interested in. Story 8. Inflation theory. There were these problems with the Big Bang explanation of the universe, specifically how the temperature is the same in every direction, where structures like galaxies come from when the universe should be smooth like butter. Inflation solves, not uniquely, those problems. It even predicted how many of such structures of such and such size there should be pretty well. So, not a bad theory. But then there's this thing. Inflation occurred like at 10 to 34 seconds after the beginning of the universe because of a field everywhere in the universe decayed from a stable point to another stable point and dumped so much energy into the universe that it expanded in size by a factor of 1050. Here's the scary thing. There's nothing which says that this can't happen again. At any moment. One moment we're here, next moment we've been obliterated by an inflationary event. If it did, the atoms in your body would suddenly be apart from each other by a distance greater than the observable universe. You'd cease to exist. No goodbyes, no final I love yous. Story 9. Not strictly a theory per se, but the simulation hypothesis. A technologically mature, post-human civilization would have enormous computing power. Based on this empirical fact, the simulation argument shows that at least one of the following propositions is true. The fraction of human-level civilizations that reach a post-human stage is very close to zero. The fraction of post-human civilizations that are interested in running ancestor simulations is very close to zero. The fraction of all people with our kind of experiences that are living in a simulation is very close to 1 dot. If it's true, then we will almost certainly go extinct before reaching post-humanity. If this is true, then there must be a strong convergence among the courses of advanced civilizations, so that virtually none contain any relatively wealthy individuals who desire to run ancestor simulations and are free to do so. If it is true, then we almost certainly live in a simulation. In the dark forest of our current ignorance, it seems sensible to apportion one's credence roughly evenly between and dot. Unless we are now living in a simulation, our descendants will almost certainly never run an ancestor simulation. Story 10, that free will and consciousness are just illusions created by the cerebral cortex. The actual decisions we make are automatic as instinctual as any animals. We just create a story in our minds, giving reasons for our actions after the fact. Our psyches, our wants, our desires, even our emotions, are just tools of a designed path of evolution over which we truly have no control. The you think you are is really just watching helplessly, while the real you acts. Story 11. Honestly, global climate change. I own a house in Florida in an A flood zone, which essentially means and 4 foot above normal tide can be an issue for me. I insure myself against flooding from tropical cyclones, but if the sea levels rise just a couple of feet, my property becomes worthless. Nobody in their right mind would want to own it. You should build hoses like I've seen at the River Rhine in Germany. One kind is built on top of columns, that is, the ground floor is empty except for the stairs, and is used for parking. The other kind is built inside a kind of barge, but on dry land, and there are large poles on the side. When the water comes, that house actually swims. Or, sell your house to a climate change denier. What could go wrong for him? And move somewhere higher. Story 12, behavioral sink. Basically, if you give mice or rats a utopia, enough food, water, lack of predators, eventually it leads to a societal collapse, including many female mice were unable to carry pregnancy to full term or to survive delivery of their litters if they did. An even greater number, after successfully giving birth, fell short in their maternal functions. Among the males, the behavior disturbances ranged from deviation to cannibalism, and from frenetic overactivity to a pathological withdrawal from which individuals would emerge to eat, drink, and move about only when other members of the community were asleep. The social organization of the animals showed equal disruption. The common source of these disturbances became most dramatically apparent in the populations of our first series of 3 experiments, in which we observed the development of what we called a behavioral sink. The animals would crowd together in greatest numbers in one of the 4 interconnecting pens in which the colony was maintained. As many as 60 of the 80 rats in each experimental population would assemble in one pen during periods of feeding. Individual rats would rarely eat except in the company of other rats. As a result, extreme population densities developed in the pen adopted for eating, leaving the others with sparse populations. In the experiments in which the behavioral sink developed, infant mortality ran as high as 96% among the most disoriented groups in the population. Story 13. That was it? What would that mean about us? And what would that mean about the universe? I mean, there are billions of galaxies that contain billions of stars, which are orbited by billions of planets. And billions of those planets orbit their star in the habitable zone. So far, there is really nothing that we've discovered in the universe, correct me if I'm wrong, that is a one-off, or the sole example of something in existence. Life exists in the universe. We are proof of that. So if the trend holds true, there must be life elsewhere. The chances are just too great for it not to. But what if that's not the case? What if we really are the only ones? What does that mean about our existence? And by our, I mean everything from the smallest microbe to man to a blue whale. If we are the only ones, then how did we get here? And by what incredibly rare process was our existence brought about? Story 14. That all our observation is limited by our perspective. We can spend all our meaningless existence looking for answers that by definition we cannot understand. I don't want to fall into the topic of religion, but I find Lovecraft's vision about the universe, in his fantasy, beings or gods that existed before time itself, and whose existence defies space and other natural forces or reactions of the universe. They exist and they cannot care less about us, because we are like an ant to them. This made me think about what we can expect from our tremendously limited vision of the universe and concepts like existence and perception. In the end, we are a colony of cells, floating forever in an infinite nothingness. Enjoy your plus minus 85 revolts around this exploding mass of gas that we call sun. Story 15. Not so much a theory as the results of an experiment, but the Milgram experiment has always scared the crap out of me. The experiment placed the test subject in a room with a proctor in a lab coat and a box with a row of switches. The switches were marked with voltage ratings and descriptions of the impact. The first switch said something like 5 volts, slight twitch, and they progressed from there up to something like 350 volts. In between were descriptors like permanent brain damage, organ failure, stuff like that. The test subject was introduced to another person, who was then led into another room. The proctor explained to the subject that he was helping to test a new rapid learning system that used electric shock to scold wrong answers. The subject was to ask a question into a microphone, and when he heard the wrong answer, he would throw the next switch, thereby delivering an electric shock to the person they'd just met before they were escorted into the other room. In reality, the second person was an actor who was sitting comfortably, not hooked up to wires, and pretending to react to the shocks. He would moan in pain on the lower settings, then he would beg for the experiment to stop at the middle settings, Then he would stop responding intelligently on the higher settings. Every time, the proctor would calmly urge the subject to continue, never threatening the subject. He just kept saying, "Please continue." The results showed that 39 out of 40 test subjects would be willing to inflict harm on another person, with all cues pointing to harm that could either be permanent or life-threatening, as long as an authority figure is present. Story 16, that artificial intelligence can either greatly benefit or completely destroy life on Earth. And many think it's the latter, and it's coming soon. The artificial intelligence AI that we are familiar with is ANI, artificial narrow intelligence, computer that is as smart as a human in one small field. This is Siri on your iPhone, the Google search engine, chess-playing robots, etc. Currently, tech companies are in a race to create the first AGI computer. AGI equals sign artificial general intelligence, which is an AI that is as smart as a human in every way, which is much, much, much more difficult to create than it may sound to anyone who hasn't researched this field. AGI will be a huge breakthrough, but a bigger one will be ASI, artificial superintelligence equals sign computer, smarter than a person in every way. This is where the problem lies. If humans can make Wi-Fi, wireless charging, etc., who knows what an ASI would be capable of? Programmers in their race to make AGI and ASI are working hastily and not using as much caution as they should. They may make mistakes that make the difference between an AI knowing whether or not it is okay to take out a town in pursuit of its goal. It is a computer with no knowledge of practical applications of right and wrong, after all. You see how this could be a problem. This is one little bit of information on AI. I highly recommend reading Wait But Why's entry on it. It is long, but very much worth the read. It gives some information that is pretty scary when you consider the effects, and some that is barely believable, but is true nevertheless. Story 17, The Great Filter. It's a theory about why the universe seems so filled with potential for life, and yet we haven't found it. It states that somewhere between pre-life and an advanced civilization capable of colonizing the stars, there's a great filter that stops them and ends life. This means humans fit into one of these three scenarios. A. We're rare, meaning we've already passed the great filter, unlike other civilizations on other planets. B. We're the first, meaning conditions in the universe are only now life-friendly, and we're among many on our way to the capability of colonization. C. We haven't hit the filter yet, meaning we're screwed. If this one is true, it means finding life or proof of life on Mars or Europa would be awful news because it would almost certainly mean the filter is still ahead of us instead of behind us. More good reading at it, the full paper from Nick Bostrom. Story 18, I forget what the actual theory is called, but in short, it's about an omniscient AI we create that will punish, torture anyone who hadn't spent their life trying to bring it into existence. It's especially scary because the theory goes that even learning about it, your punishment will get worse because you know about it and you still don't try to bring it into existence. And every time you even think about it, your punishment will get worse. Story 19. So when people talk about the heat death of the universe, what scares me isn't the universe ending. I mean, everything has to end eventually. What scares me is, what happens if life continues to evolve and survive up to that point? If whatever life exists is as conscious and intelligent as we are, I can't even imagine what it would be like for everything to just finally balance out and stop. Imagine the very last bit of energy that gets expended ever of all time. It's terrifying, and every time someone talks about the heat death, or sometimes even just the universe, I can't help but think about it. Story 20. Not sure if it's a formal scientific theory. It's Cixin Liu's dark forest theory, which became the cornerstone of his trilogy novel, The Three-Body Problem. It's basically an alternative explanation to the Fermi paradox than the Great Filter theory. It's based on three basic assumptions and is somewhat of a cosmic sociological theory. Basically, the conclusion of the theory is that there are plenty of civilizations in this universe. They are just hiding themselves, because whoever fails to do so will be wiped out by others. And the worst part of the theory is everyone is forced to wipe the exposed ones out, or otherwise they eventually will become the target as well. Hence the name Dark Forest. Story 21, Heat Death. To put it simply, everything in the universe needs energy to do stuff. The process of doing something and releasing that energy. All of this contributes to something called entropy, which is essentially the overall balance of energy in the universe. Where there is an imbalance of energy, the laws of physics want to balance it, and something happens. Anything, a chemical reaction, motion, light, everything that happens is just the laws of physics trying to get to a state where all of the energy of the universe is in balance. When eventually everything in the universe is in balance, nothing can happen anymore because there will be no more imbalance to merit the use of energy. Everything will cool until all matter and energy reach absolute zero and eventually decay into subatomic particles and disappear forever. If the universe reaches this point, bar none, nothing can exist ever again. Story 22. This is a great thread, and I love seeing the discussions, but really at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that we're such an unlikely outcome of all probabilities just to get to this point. Think about it. We're sitting here, we being basically unclothed apes with large brains and dexterous hands, manipulating electrons and typing on tools we have made, which are globally interconnected. Why? Because we unclothed apes love to communicate with each other. Really, there's no other reason. At the end of our lives, we will look back and say, yep, that's the way it had to go, because it did. No bullcrap, no going back. If there's one thing I believe, it's that there is no way we're meant to fall as a species due to an uncontrollable circumstance. Gamma ray burst? That doesn't make for much of a plotline finisher. We're going to go out by one of Terry Pratchett's horsemen of the apocalypse. War, pestilence, famine, and death. I'll give you death as the outcome of one or more combined of the other three. Personally, I'd put my money on the end of the world being human created rather than a natural event. If you keep on flipping switches which have a small chance of ending the world, eventually you'll flip the switch which actually does. We just can't help ourselves. If something can be done, it will be done. It's in our nature, and there's not a damn thing any of us can do about it. To be alive and sentient at all is an infinitesimally small probability. Any observant creator knows the story is what matters, and it's just getting to the good part. Rest in peace, Sir Terry. You are truly missed back here on Roundworld. Story 23. This is a hypothetical I came up with a while ago. Intelligent life isn't really all that uncommon in our universe. The closest intelligent alien civilization might not be that close to us, but they do exist. They're even well within the distance necessary for us to communicate, albeit over many light years, resulting in a significant delay. But the reason we haven't heard from them is because they're all keeping quiet. They don't want to broadcast out into the void of space, the way we've been doing ever since we invented the radio. Maybe there is something in the void they're trying to hide from? The entire galactic civilization is holding its breath, waiting for danger to pass, and we are the crying baby, which gives away our position to the enemy. Story 24. Not a formal theory, but the idea that there are countless intelligent civilizations out there. Look how humans treated other humans of slightly different technological advancement when one desired the resources of the other. Any alien that has the ability to reach Earth would likely have the resources to single-handedly overpower even our combined global military. End us all, enslave us, perform testing on us, or just save a few of us as samples and wipe the Earth clean so they can move in. Just look how overpowered an ancient Roman civilization would be by a dozen or so average American citizens, armed with just consumer-available technology and weapons. Now, instead of a couple thousand-year technology gap, imagine a 1 million-year technology gap. Story 25, the gray goo theory, or somewhat more likely, strange matter. Gray goo theory is along the lines of, if we manage to create nanotech bots that can self-replicate by changing organic matter into more nanobots, then what's to stop it from slowly turning the entire planet into nanobots? A giant ball of self-replicating bots, just destroying everything organic to make more of themselves. That's scary. But even worse, and I think more likely, is strange matter doing essentially the exact same thing. I'm kind of hungover, but I'll give this a try in explaining. Strange matter is a matter that I believe is negatively charged and gets more stable the larger it gets. Whenever it comes into contact with normal matter, it turns that matter into strange matter and grows. So it's like the gray goo theory, in that everything it comes into contact with is then changed into strange matter and continues the process. The idea that there is a ball of strange matter just flying through space at unreasonably high speed and could just mess up everything we know is kind of messed up. A lot of okay ways to die in this world, having my matter altered to a completely different type of matter sounds horrifying.